Okay, and welcome back to everyone who's been following along. This is week 3 of Reboot and Thrive, and this is the week about making an impact. And so for all of you who maybe are joining for the first time, I'm Christopher Nelson with Wealthward Capital. We help technology professionals diversify into passive income portfolios. And we've been presenting a 3-week live series called Reboot and Thrive. We're all in the middle of a hard reboot right now. Right now, the system has done a hard crash. We'll figure out the root cause later. Right now, as we're rebuilding, we want to take in new pieces of code so that we can come out of this thriving. You know, myself, as I shared in the first episode, having gone through, the dot-com crash in 2001, having gone through the Great Recession, I had friends who leaned in and said, don't get stuck. It's time to move forward. And that's what we're doing here with Reboot and Thrive. I'm excited about the Make an Impact Week because this is really around how you can reflect inward, make changes, and make an impact right now. I'm bringing on as my first guest a personal friend, somebody who I respect immensely, Meerah Rajavel, who is the CIO of Citrix. And do you want to take a couple minutes and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you're doing today, Meerah?
Sure, Christopher. First of all, I'm delighted to be here and really, really delighted. And it's great that you guys are doing this, Christopher. And, this is a time that we have to really stop and step back and do some reflection of how we are going to lead ourselves, lead our family, and lead our work as well. I'm glad to hear the way you guys have structured it as a 3-part series. So I'm really excited to be here. A little about myself. I was born, brought up in India, and I moved here to the United States, a country of opportunity, in my early 20s. And all my career has been, and I love technology. So I've been a geek at heart, even though today I'm a much more a business person than a technologist, but it's always geek at heart. And thrilled to be right now as part of the CIO of Citrix. Actually, the thing that, especially what you talked about, Reboot and Thrive, for me, more than ever, the place I work is extremely rewarding. I'll tell you why. Citrix is actually in the business of connecting people and remote workforce. And we are in many of the hospitals and many of the healthcare right now, and many of the business that is keep going and keeping people in job. And it's very rewarding when you have a crisis, the company that you work for has a purpose that's actually making the world still moving. So extremely pleased to be part of the series.
Excellent. And so really what I want to start with, Meerah, and part of this I think goes into your story, and you're somebody who has always had challenges in front of you, and I think that you've also had people encourage you through challenges. I always remember, and I don't know if you know this, but I remember vividly the story of your father in India really encouraging you to play with the boys and participate with the boys. That was really counter to culture. But I feel like you have this mindset that when you see a challenge in front of you, or you see something that other people perceive as hard or difficult, you lean into that. And I want to just sort of pause for a minute and have you reflect on, that mindset that you have and how you have leveraged that in your career to lean into things like this.
Yeah, I think I came from a very conservative culture, though my dad was very much of like, don't ever put yourself down because you're a girl. There was a lot of social constraints that I need to work with, even family constraints. So at a certain age, even my dad cannot support me anymore. He actually has to hold me back, right? So it really helped me to look at, like, if I want to achieve something or if I want to get something, forget about achievement, just get, right? And if I really want it, I have to get creative. I have to work within the constraints. So it's always the choice of, do I want it? How much I want it? How do I find creative ways to get it, right? And that gave me this framework of, I call it the circle of influence, right? Anytime, especially during crisis like this, I always look at like what I control and what I don't control and what I can influence. What I control, I have to spend energy there because that's something that I can make a change. Literally, I can make a change. I should also spend time in the circle of influence I call, I don't control, but if I influence right, I can do something about it. And my philosophy always is minimize or almost eliminate, right? I mean, we are human, so I'm not going to pretend that I never think about it, right? But we are all human. So at some point, we also think about things we don't control. To
Right.
me, it's eliminate or minimize the time you spend on what you don't control, right? And that framework always helped me in looking at how we are approaching whether it's an adversity or it is a crisis or it is something, because it's something in life we are dealt with it. I mean, with our spouses, with our kids. I mean, the best ones are our kids, right? You don't
Right.
you feel you have a lot of control. The reality is you have no control, and you have to achieve through influence. And as two toddler boys, right? I mean, it's
That's right.
everything is influence, and you have to just reason with them, rational with them, right? So to me, that's a skill you need. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be a school going kid, or you're in the college, or you're a working young professional with no family, or you're a young family, you're a old person. Doesn't matter. That's actually a framework that tremendously helped me in how I put my thought process through. The other thing I always look at is sort of scenario planning, right? I mean, scenario planning to me is kind of step back and think about what are the plan A, plan B, plan C type of a thing. If this happens, actually, it's not a plan A, plan B. If this happens, this is how it is. If this happens, this is how it is. If this happens,
Right.
this is how it is, right? I mean, it's almost like different scenarios. And a lot of times, that will push you to think the boundaries in a current situation, what might potential things are, and also how you eliminate, because that also helps you to think about, I mean, currently what we are going through as a world. I mean, the epidemic is probably not anybody has gone through a cycle like this that's a global scale, right? I mean, we have been through many, right? Recession and everything, that's a very different instigator. But when it comes to the current epidemic, which is probably the most global in the recent centuries or even couple of centuries, right? I mean, we are today truly a global village. And it's a good thing about the global village is free movement. The downside is when things move, the good and bad both moves fast, right?
Right.
So it's really easy to say, hey, how did I handle it in the past? How do I handle now? Versus when you do scenario planning, we need to really think about not looking at how we did, and also not putting ourselves into a situation which leads to things can change fast. I mean, I'll give you an example, right? So, for example, when this was actually happening, I mean, we were lucky in Citrix, we as IT really need to start getting our Chinese workforce to move into a remote situation way ahead of rest of the company, but it was a very small scale, right? So what we said was, hey, if this extends to the world, let's start doing some scenario planning. So we started a little bit in advance, and then we started saying, why don't we do a test run or pilot run? So we went from a 300 people site to an 800 people site, and we were having a plan of going through one at a time and make sure that we can take load, we can do 2 sites and we can take load. But there was a day that came, and things was moving very fast. I think the first week of March was probably the accelerated week. Like we have to just go through from 0 to 80 miles an hour, and or a 5 mile to 80 miles an hour type of a thing, right? To me, things move fast. When you have a crisis or when you are doing a situation that's like current situation, open to options and ready to jump, right? So for me, we have to flip the switch overnight, going from less than 200 people to almost 10,000 people has to go remote. Just one go, right? So one of my favorite author, or one of my favorite person when it comes to adversity and how he dealt with this is Eric Weinmeier, who's actually a blind person. I mean, my love for mountains, and I always love summiting tall mountains, not because it's a big thing to brag about. It actually made me feel humble and insignificant in front of nature every time we go through. And Eric actually he was not a born blind person. He went blind in his age of 12. I mean, it's one thing to be a born blind person. You don't know anything about the world, but it's another thing to be, you have seen the world and now you're, what you had, something, a privilege has been taken out of you. How are you going to deal with it? And he actually took his adversity to an advantage, to the point he really went and spent his energy in learning rock climbing. And that's how he, managed. And that skill literally transitioned as he grew old to be the only blind person in the world to scale 7 summits. To me, so when it comes to adversity, sometimes, it's taking calculated risk, lean in, and don't pretend it's going to pass away, and focus on what you control and what you can influence.
And so, you touched a little bit on some of the intense physical activities that you engage in. And I think sometimes, people see you, and I've actually been in the room when we've started talking about your summits or your marathons on 7 continents, and people do the head swivel. Wait, what? However, I think it's really interesting when you talk about your concept of the circle of influence, what you can control, what you can't, and what you can influence. How do you think your physical training, like to your point, going out there and seeing a lot of things that you can't control and getting you micro focused on things you can and maybe things you can influence, how do you feel like that becomes sort of a training to really reinforce that mindset, or does it?
I mean, I think probably that's another reason I love mountaineering, right? I mean, I can control Mother Nature.
Right.
I can't control the weather. I mean, this happened multiple times. We were in Mount Everest, and it was our last day, and we are supposed to take off and come to Kathmandu to catch our international flight. And the weather came down for 4 days. There have been like waiting in queue. There was no flight out of Luka to come to Kathmandu. And we came down, and we have been told, we are in line. There are 4 more days of queue in front of us for us to even get on a plane. So, of course, can we control the weather? No. So our first reaction is, okay, we can't afford to miss our international flight. What can we control? What we can control is the weather. So let's not worry about it. Can we control the air traffic controller's decision? No, we can't control. They're going to be, safety is important. You're not going to do something stupid, and that's going to put your life in danger, because my goal of Everest was not getting to up there, but it is getting back home safe. That's where the real summit is, when we get home back with the family, right? So we said, okay, so what are the options? So we went and inquired about all the other options. So safely, what are the other options? So we learned that there's a helicopter option, but it's a very narrow window that we need to do it. Or there's an alternate, there's 2 other options, but both of them will not get us to Kathmandu in time. One is actually we can hike another 25 miles down, get to a nearest village. And then there is actually, we can take the road route using buses and jeeps to get to Kathmandu. That's an option, but it will be probably 2 days of journey. The other option is actually wait it out, and there probably is going to be a high probability that we can get on the plane next day. So our option is, okay, the helicopter has the maximum chance of success. There's a cost involved. So we did a quick cost calculation to say, okay, we have to spend this money. If you miss the international flight, what is it? What is a safety for us? And then we end up actually influencing the person to take us in a helicopter. It was flying, it's official and everything. So we took a helicopter, but it was actually a lot of quick decision, right? When you're going through, we literally have to come up with this analysis in less than 25 minutes to make a decision and put our deposit in to get the things done. All of this analysis has to be done in such a short window, because they only had a certain number of helicopters even, but we didn't get the answer that we are getting a seat for another 3 hours after going through all this and waiting in, But the good news is we did take the helicopter, we landed safe, and the next day we all flew out of Kathmandu back to our home. So to me, some of the things, you just don't need to take it always to work, but it also is equally important, right? We were a team of 6 people. So one of a couple of things for me, it actually is so important, is clarity, right? What is the clarity, right? Whether you're leading organization or an enterprise or a company, more than ever, your leadership matters the most. Your team need transparency and clarity, crystal clear, right? It's sort of, if you go all over the map, they're going to get confused, right? So for us, the clarity was very clear in that situation I was explaining. Our clarity is we have to be safe, number one, and we want to reach Kathmandu, not to miss our international flight. It's always safety over reaching on time, right? That clarity needs to be there. The second is you're only as good as your team. I mean, we were 6 people. Most of them were corporate leaders in some fashion or the other. And you know, when you have like five C-level people trying to get together, if you all try to be leaders, that's not going to happen, right? I mean, and also you're only as good as your team. So we literally huddled down, and we in fact had an informal sort of a role, because we all know we are very strong personalities and we all cannot have our opinions. So we even had like, who's the decision on food, who's the decision on safety, who's the decision. So when this came, the person who's, you know, responsible for safety and financial, they both jumped in, because there's a financial implication and there's a safety implication, and then we move from there, right? So to me, you're only as good as your team. So when you're a leader, especially a crisis situation like this, I am actually super fortunate in every single company I worked in, has been very fortunate to work with some leaders who are super great I was learning from, and teams who are super great in what we accomplished. So this whole notion of you're only as good as your team is always important, whether in a good situation or bad situation. But when you're in crisis, that's when really the rubber hits the road and you'll see the results in that.
Wow. There was definitely a lot there. I think that was really dense. And I think you're leading us into the situation of, you know, right now, as people are thinking about, you know, home life and work life, and this exterior crisis is around us, you know, what are steps that you're taking to stay focused at work and to lead yourself and lead your team?
I think, you know, it starts with you taking care of yourself. To me, in today's world, you know, work and life are not two different things. People always used to say work-life balance. I always looked at work-life integration, especially if you're a knowledge worker. You know, your brain is not like really compartmentalized. You cannot say this part of my brain can think about work, this part of my brain can think about, you know, a family. That's not even an option. It's one brain that's going to think everything. So it's really important that you take care of, it starts with you. If you're in a good physical, mental and psychological frame, right? I mean, spiritual as well. It's equally important, right? More than ever. Being positivity this is the time for positivity, in my opinion. And I truly believe this too will pass. I mean, it's really sad, don't get me wrong, when I see the everyday news around people impacted, families impacted. There are some families, they're just leaving one family member and the rest of the family is wiped out. That's not an easy thing. It's really a hard thing, whether it's your family or someone's, you know, their family, or even a stranger's family. It actually makes my heart bleed. But at the same time, I feel truly, I've seen act of humanity to the level I've never witnessed in my life. And I felt personally gratitude towards simple things in my life I never felt about, right? I mean, simple things. I mean, getting out of the house to get some fresh air felt like it's a privilege right now. It's truly a privilege. We took it for granted, right? And also it teaches us a lot of things. Like it's not just for myself. I see, you know, people being very considerate of others. I mean, you go grocery shopping, people are extremely considerate of others, keeping the distance, and people thanking the people. The teller gets thanked. They never got thanked. They got yelled at, probably. The counter person never got. So I think as we are coming out of this, I do feel that we are going to coming back and, you know, touching our core human values is what we need to value, number one. Number two, every adversity comes out. I mean, out of the dot-com burst came new way of looking at technology, right? New business models came into play. Out of the financial crisis came new financial business models, and became microbanking, or all those kind of things that came into picture. So to me, this is actually going to bring, and especially with some of the latest and greatest technologies. And I'm already hearing things around, what has been considered, especially in telemedical space, has been a problem, but now everybody is getting consultation through telemedicine.
Yeah.
Telemedicine is going to become a mainstream business. Now people are getting comfortable, right? And there is actually a lot of focus around, manufacturing plants that should be running at capacity. So IoT and remote hands and robots are going to play a much larger role where appropriate, right? That doesn't mean people are going to go out of job. It just different type of job. And we are also starting to recognize the human connection more. So I feel there are elements of what we took for granted, we are going to be willing to pay for it more now.
Yes.
So honestly, I feel coming out of this, we are probably going to come out stronger, right? I mean, any challenge, when you come on the other side of the other end of the spectrum, I'm a firm believer, you go through conditioning, and the pain that you go through, it's like you're a weight trainer, the pain actually translates into higher strength.
That's
so
right.
That's what we are going to come out of.
With higher strength. And so taking that, so taking care of yourself, being positive, I think those are all important, because positivity, right? It's a lens, right? In this attitude of gratitude and bringing that forward. And so leading yourself, and then what do you bring, and how are you encouraging your team right now as everyone is, number one is, I think in technology, a lot of people are still employed and are still working full-time, which I think is, again, amazing. However, there are more external things with this work-life integration. So how are we leading our teams? How are you doing that?
Yeah, I think, leading teams, I also think equally with your taking care of yourself, because a lot of things that goes back to families are at home, whether it's your, dealing with a school-going kid who need to be homeschooled to some extent, even though there is like great ways the teleconferencing and video conferencing are playing a role. So to me, it starts with, making sure that we are being considerate, right? At this point in time, as you said, we call it like a kid coming over and running around into a teleconference is not anymore. The people probably get to know the other person. It's funny. We think with face-to-face, we made deeper connection. I feel people started getting to know about their colleagues more through digital than their face-to-face, because you're actually being viewed at a setting where it's your home. So you get to know the true you with the less layers, I feel.
That's right.
The facade has fallen down. So you're actually sort of seeing your pets online. I mean, I have actually folks having parties of having their pets introduced to each other, virtual yoga classes and community. I mean, our Slack channels are like amazing names, some funny names as well, things like that. It's not just always happy hour. Yes, we all care about taking a glass of wine and having a happy hour. But I think considerates and making sure touching the human part is important. But coming back to leading our teams, I go back to taking a few different things, right? I mean, taking a calculated risk, it starts with, right? I mean, at this point in time, we need to move quick. You're not going to have all the answers. This is actually a unique situation. Probably nobody has done it before. So how are you going to do it? So take calculated risk. More than ever, we need to get customer obsession, right? I mean, yes, there's policies, this process, but doesn't matter whether you're IT, your customers are internal, or you're a tech support person where your customers are your company's customer, doesn't matter. Customer obsession is who is consuming the services you provide or the products you develop, right? And also the other thing I think it's at this time it's super important is, communication and collaboration gets, I actually, honestly, I feel this is getting better, because as we are going virtual, at least I can tell in my own team, we had a little reflection, a month-in reflection with my leadership team. There are a few things the team called out, and one of them was they felt they're able to break down the silos so quickly when this crisis stopped. And they really felt like we got into being data-driven, right? I mean, data-driven and outcome-driven partnerships became even more important.
Wow.
The other thing I would say is, at this time, regardless of what your function is, whether you're a salesperson, you're a finance person, look at yourself as how you're going to be frictionless in what you do. Because this is not the time you have a drive-by to ask some question. Yes, it was great, but I also think it leveled down, and it actually helped people to develop an empathy, because it's the same, whether you're sitting next to the CEO's office or you're in the other part of the world, you're all same now, all of a sudden.
That's right.
All of a sudden, you're all the same. So, which actually, really, I feel coming out of this experience, people are going to have a different way of looking at the future of the workforce. And I think for technology workers, this is fantastic. I think technology has been already more open to remote work, but this is even better because it's actually going to push, especially given the talent gap that we have. This is going to push us to be more open, embracing, remote work culture with the appropriate level of touch points and appropriate level of collaboration, and really leveraging the right tools and technologies, right? I mean, making sure we have the right connectivity, making sure we have the right collaboration tools, making sure we have the right content information sharing tool. This becomes a platform. And I'm actually excited how we bring what we have been super fortunate to other parts of the industry. I'm already seeing, like, classes are getting delivered more through online, including music classes. I mean, our kids are, I think the learning industry is going to have a big change. People are really seeing a viable business models out of it.
Wow, you've covered a lot, and Meerah, I have to thank you so much. And I'm going to take a minute, and I'm going to try and synthesize, and I'm going to try and read back for everyone really what you've covered today, because you've covered quite a bit. And I would encourage everyone, for things that you didn't get, like, go back, re-listen to it. But we started off really talking about mindset, and what I really like is your circle of influence. Taking a mindset, understanding what you can control, what you can't control, and what you can influence, having those buckets around you. And then what I think that you talked about after that, what you did talk about, was then scenario planning, understanding, with that data, how do you sort of construct and reinforce those boundaries. You then talked a lot about how you put yourself physically forward, and you have a lot of I guess, activities that you've had in your life that really help reinforce that circle of influence. I think what you talked about today directly into people for work, number one, take care of yourself. And I know you are somebody who, you meditate, you find quiet, find some peace, understand that positivity is a choice, and being grateful for all the things that we have is really important. And then, what you then went on to talk about, which this is why I enjoy all of our conversations, is you look at the opportunities, right? And you went through and talked about some industries, medical industry, education industry, that are going to see gains because of this. And also how we as teams, we get a chance to peel away layers and see people for who they really are. And that truly is the opportunity right now. And I think as a leader, how do we be considerate? How do we get to know each other better? Because then we can understand, how do we motivate and encourage our team through this time? And then, I loved how you shift to a great business focus, customer obsession, become obsessed with your customer right now, because we need to make sure that while we're going through things, we are still in the business of taking care of customers. And if we focus on that customer obsession, our business will come out of this stronger. And that was a theme that you had too, is this is adversity. This will make us stronger. Customer obsession, becoming frictionless, internal and external. Boom. That was a lot. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. I know our audience is going to get a ton out of this. And I know that I would encourage everyone to follow Meerah on LinkedIn. She posts, she'll do some blogs occasionally. She used to do it. She does it on and off, but I would encourage you, because when she does, it is so viable. And I want to encourage everyone to then subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, because then you'll get everything this week. And Meerah, if you were going to leave everyone with what I covered today, like, what would be the one thing that you would encourage people to do today to ensure that they're not stuck in moving forward and making an impact?
Never lose hope. It's your opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Meerah. We'll talk again soon.